Shared reading in the remote world. Fontes and Pinnell have 3 models for remote learning, and I'm sure your classroom falls into one of the 3. Synchronous is when you are doing the lesson in real time, but students are at home connected by Zoom. Asynchronous is when students are accessing the lesson at home on their own whenever it is most convenient to them. There are no time constraints or Zoom appointments. Synchronous and asynchronous requires some kind of device to be used by the student. No access to technology is self-explanatory, and most of these students pick up paper pencil packets prepared by the teacher. During a synchronous shared reading lesson, you'll want to follow the lesson card for delivery of the 4 steps during the Zoom. By the way, refer back to the Shared Reading and 4 Steps video for more information about the shared reading lesson itself. During the Zoom session, you'll introduce the text, read the book aloud for students as students listen. Don't forget to pause strategically to add comments, as well as allow students time to think about the text. Then, invite students to join you during the second reading of the text. My recommendation is to teach students to mute their microphones during the first and second readings. Discussion can and should still happen, but you'll need to set up systems for students to respond in breakout rooms or call on students or in the chat box, whatever works for the grade level you're working with. The goal of shared reading is for students to become independent upon repeated reading of the text. Create opportunities for students to reread the text on their own with a recorded version or during another Zoom session. Maybe even have students submit a recording of themselves reading the shared reading text on their own. Asynchronous shared reading lessons will require a pre-recorded video that follows the 4 steps of a shared reading lesson. Following the Fontes and Pinnell lesson card, your shared reading lesson video should have a brief introduction, a first reading of the text where the teacher reads to the students. The second reading should invite the students to join the teacher in the reading of the text. With that in mind, you'll want to be super intentional about telling the kids to pause and restart the video as you move through reading and rereading of the text so they can think about and talk about discussion questions with a family member or a person in the home. Remember that shared reading is a repeated reading of a text with the goal that students become independent. Create opportunities for students to reread the text on their own with a recorded version if possible. Maybe even have students submit a recording of themselves reading the shared reading text on their own. If students do not have access to technology, they'll need a hard copy of the text along with a packet of things they'll need to move through the 4 steps of the lesson. In a perfect world, there would be a copy of the shared reading text, whether it is a copy from the classroom or a copy from a PDF. What you see on the screen is a directions for shared reading template, basically a form for you to write out the directions for the lesson. It is modified for delivery by a parent and allows the basic structure of shared reading. The form can be found in the Remote Learning No Access resources, and it's called No Access Lesson Directions for Parents, Caregivers. Again, encourage parents to create opportunities for students to reread the book many times until they can read it on their own independently. Hope this information about shared reading in the remote world was helpful.